evil. Don't let it into the heart. If evil is already inside, then label it as evil. Bruce Charlton. The problem with the most prevalent forms of mainstream, normal evil, such as the litmus test issues, is that they are invited into the heart, and once inside the heart they are regarded as good. There are many incentives, immediate and long-term, psychological and social material, for supporting the net evil totalitarian strategies that I call litmus test issues. There are many rewards for support, and many sanctions against failure to support. And when we inhabit a decades-old and pervasive intrusive totalitarian ideology, almost all of public discourse is inhabited by one or another, or several, of all, of the strategies of evil, such that it becomes all but impossible to survive and thrive without going along with one or many of the strategies of evil. Such is the nature of the human condition in a world where evil is dominant, and where the dominance of evil reaches down into the detailed workings of almost every significant nation, institutions, organization, corporation, and nowadays penetrates even into friendship groups, clubs, hobbies, and the family itself. How can we inhabit such an evil world, without ourselves taking the side of evil in the spiritual war of this world? The Christian answer is very simple, I believe, because it simply involves that we recognize evil, and inwardly reject that evil. This rejection sounds easy, and it can be easy, a child can do it, but in practice is apparently so difficult as to be not just impossible but incomprehensible. One difficulty is that we are all sinners, as the phrase puts it, that is to say, we all practice evil. This is unavoidable not just because this is an evil-dominated world, but because we ourselves can only sometimes and partially desire and live in harmony with divine creation. For much of our lives we cannot resist thinking, wanting, and doing evil. Therefore, to recognize and reject evil entails that we recognize and reject many aspects of ourselves, and those whom we most love. And also that we recognize and accept that this situation will not, because it cannot, change, for all of mortal life on earth, we are and shall be stuck with our own and other people's deficiencies and wickedness. If the above is a broadly correct account of human life on earth, and if evil ought to be dealt with by recognition and inner rejection, then we can see that it is a big problem, perhaps the biggest of all current spiritual problems, when people invite evil into their hearts and call it good. Instead, we should strive not to invite evil into our hearts. But when, inevitably, we do invite evil into our hearts, when we, inevitably, find ourselves supporting some evil strategy, then we must resist doubling down on our sin, and calling that evil good. We must, especially, resist defending intentional strategic evil, or promoting it on the grounds that is a lesser evil than something else, or on the grounds that, like all evil, everywhere, ever, the strategic evil contains some good, or potentially good, aspects. No, instead we must do that which is simple, recognize and reject. And when, and it is a case of when not if, because everybody is a sinner, all will fail and fall, and fail frequently. Daily, hourly, we are compelled, or cannot resist, going along with or even publicly supporting some evil strategy. Then inwardly, in the privacy of our souls, we need to make a clear act of recognition and rejection. Don't invite evil, and when we have already invited it into our ears, ensure that the evil does not become a familiar, habitual, acceptable, friend and companion. Ensure instead that the evil we have already invited, accepted, and already supported in our hearts, then gets acknowledged and labeled in accordance with its true nature, as an evil we inwardly reject. Why AA is qualitatively worse than the internet/social media/smartphones. Bruce Charlton. People apparently have difficulty understanding, or explaining to themselves, just why post-November 2022 AI is qualitatively worse than the previously existing computer media phenomena, such as the internet, social media and smartphones. The answer is quite simple, upfront and no secret. As usual, probably because evil must be invited into the heart in order to damage the soul, the agents of strategic evil always tell us what they intend for us, before they try to do it. In this case, they have told us explicitly that the purpose of AI is to replace human thinking, judgment, creativity, and loving relationships. Again, AI is intended to replace humans in the realms of 1. Thinking. 2. Judgment. 3. Creativity. 4. Loving relationships. In other words, the explicit intent of AI is to replace human beings in their most distinctive and spiritually highest aspects. And that is what people are agreeing to, when they defend and promote the AI project. The fact, and I regard it as a simple and sure fact, that AI cannot replace human beings in these aspects is almost irrelevant to the purpose of AI because the purpose does not depend upon AI actually being able to do these things, but only on convincing human beings that AI can do these things. In sum, the reason for the $10 investment and subsidy of AI the mandatory top-down societal transformations, the colossal pro-AI career and status incentivization of the intellectual, technical, and managerial class, is simply that people will believe that AI can replace human thinking / judgment / creativity / loving relationships. The endemic condition of AI idolatry can therefore be defined the belief that AI can replace human thinking / judgment / creativity / loving relationships. Because if you believe that AI can replace human thinking / judgment / creativity / loving relationships, then you will almost inevitably, sooner or later, conclude that AI should replace human thinking / judgment / creativity / loving relationships. The should follows the can, because AI is, and has been grossly subsidized, at our expense, so as to be, quicker, easier, and more reliable than human beings. In other words, if we believe AI can do X as well as or better than humans, then it follows that AI should do X. To conclude, it is the belief about AI that does the spiritual harm to human beings. We have been told explicitly what AI is intended to do, and there is a trillions dollars international program tasked with implementing this. Thus, those who justify and advocate AI just are agreeing with, justifying and advocating, the actual and ongoing totalitarian strategy of replacing human beings in their most distinctive and highest aspects. This is the side the AI idolaters have chosen, in the spiritual war of this world. And who could deny that the global totalitarian AI project and strategy has, so far, been overwhelmingly successful in convincing great swathes of people, especially in the managerial, technical, and intellectual classes, that AI can, and therefore, implicitly, should, replace human thinking / judgment / creativity / loving relationships. In 3 short years, idolatry has become not just statistically normal, not just a functional requisite for tens of millions, not just ubiquitous and unavoidable on and around the internet and social media, not just socially rewarded. But idolatry has become positively valued. Given the provenance, intent, and effects of AI we have here an explanation for the observation of a unique and qualitatively enhanced nature of personal spiritual corruption, directly resulting from the high and increasing prevalence of AI idolatry. AI will not outthink us, we will choose to think like AI, which is choosing not to think at all. Berger. In his most recent post, Why AI is Qualitatively Worse Than the Internet/Social Media/Smartphones, Dr. Charlton provides a succinct answer to the same sort of question I attempted to address the other day. He writes, quote, "The answer is quite simple, upfront and no secret. As usual, probably because evil must be invited into the heart in order to damage the soul, the agents of strategic evil always tell us what they intend for us, before they try to do it. In this case, they have told us explicitly that the purpose of AI is to replace human thinking, judgment, creativity, and loving relationships. Again, AI is intended to replace humans in the realms of 1. Thinking. 2. Judgment. 3. Creativity. 4. Loving relationships. In other words, the explicit intent of AI is to replace human beings in their most distinctive and spiritually highest aspects. And that is what people are agreeing to, when they defend and promote the AI project." End quote. If you don't get that, well, I guess you'll never get it. I don't have much to add other than to comment on the biggest supposed problem of AI is the dystopian, sci-fi fear that it will one day learn to outthink us through some sort of technological supremacy. I don't see it that way. Neither does Dr. Charlton. What is more likely is that we will willingly learn to think like AI, that is, not think at all. I don't believe AI will be able to outthink us one day, however, there is a very good chance that we will be unable to outthink AI. Not because AI is superior, but because we will choose to become inferior in our thinking, judgment, and creativity. We will allow our thinking to sink to the level of AI. Put another way, AI's thinking, judgment, and creativity will not, and cannot, surpass ours. Instead, we will allow AI to erode our thinking, judgment, and creativity to the point where they will be indistinguishable from AI's. AI will not be qualitatively better than us. On the contrary, we will be qualitatively indistinguishable from AI in thinking, judgment, and creativity. AI will not overtake us, we will spiritually capitulate to AI by willingly surrendering our thinking, judgment, and creativity to it. Once we agree to surrender our thinking, judgment, and creativity to AI, we will have effectively surrendered our spirit. We will, in essence, perform the equivalent of a spiritual lobotomy upon ourselves. We will suffocate the divine within us. We will forego our spirit and unique personality in favor of imitating and replicating AI, in our thoughts, judgment, and creativity. And with what do we expect the divine to communicate once we have surrendered our spirit and personality, our thinking, judgment, and creativity? And what effect will such despiritualization have on our loving relationships, particularly our relationships with the divine? On the matter of Roald Dahl and his loss of faith in the bosses. Berger. Although I am familiar with Roald Dahl and his work, I have never read him, not even as a child. I don't know why, but there it is. Anyway, I mention him because I happened to watch a couple of Wes Anderson's film adaptations of some Dahl short stories the other day and became immediately fascinated with the depictions of how he wrote. Discovering authors' writing processes has always been a hobby for me. I love learning about the rituals, superstitions, tools, times, and places that writers believe help them in their craft. Dahl was not a disappointment in this regard. He wrote on average 4 hours a day in a small writing hut in his backyard. Inside, he sat nestled in an armchair with a custom-built writing board perched on his lap and used 4 sharpened pencils to record his ideas and make corrections. Dahl describes the details of his writing process in the short clip below. After watching the Anderson film adaptations, I did some superficial research into Dahl's life and quickly discovered that he was born in Cardiff, Wales. The son of Norwegian immigrants, he was baptized into and raised in the Church of Norway but was also influenced by the Anglicanism of the boarding schools he attended as a child. His boarding school experiences eventually lulled him toward agnosticism, because he could not square the behavior of religious figures and leaders with the ideals and virtues they preached. In his autobiography, Dahl notes,
I knew very well that only the night before this preacher had shown neither forgiveness nor mercy in flogging some small boy that had broken the rules. Did they preach one thing and practice another, these men of God? It was all this, I think, that made me begin to have doubts about religion and even about God.
Following a series of personal tragedies, including the death of one of his daughters, Dahl's doubts about religion and God eventually became outright rejection of both. Dahl claimed that although he desperately wanted to believe in Christianity, he could not reconcile the tragedy he had experienced with a loving Christian God. He pinpointed his loss of faith to a consultation he had had with the Archbishop of Canterbury following his daughter's death.
I sat there wondering if this great and famous churchman really knew what he was talking about and whether he knew anything at all about God or heaven, and if he didn't, then who in the world did? And from that moment on, my darlings, I'm afraid I began to wonder whether there really was a God or not.
Dahl became an atheist shortly afterward and, as far as I know, remained one until his death. One can only hope he chose to accept Jesus' offer of salvation after his mortal life ended. Dahl's loss of faith inspired me to reflect on my own supposed Christian upbringing, my time in Catholic schools, and my own involvement in the Catholic Church, and I found that many of my experiences mirrored Dahl's, particularly as they concern the hypocrisy and vacuity of what calls itself the clergy these days. Although I have not experienced the intense personal tragedy of losing a child, I sympathized with Dahl's sorrow, as well as the skepticism and anger that eventually made him lose his faith. I recalled the many times I nearly turned my back on God for some of the same reasons Dahl had and was immediately reminded of some of the things that had saved me. The most significant understanding that kept me from slipping into atheism was the sincere comprehension that mortal life was inevitably tragic. It's not just that no one gets out alive, in the mortal sense, it's also that no one gets out unscarred. No amount of innocence or blessed, good living will spare anyone from the inherent suffering and entropy of this world, and I suppose this is the straw that broke Dahl's back when it came to his faith. He could not, apparently, square the traditional/conventional definition of an all-loving, benevolent omni-God with the world's suffering and entropy, the same sort of handing God back his ticket that had shifted and firmly kept Dostoevsky's Ivan Karamazov in the atheist camp. I must admit that I struggled with this reconciliation for a long time, too. The thing that saved me from becoming another Ivan Karamazov was the recognition that the assumption of a benevolent, loving God was true. However, the assumption of the all-powerful, all-knowing omni-God was not. The work of Jesus was necessary to save us from the unideal reality of mortal life, and the unideal reality of mortal life exists precisely because God the Creator/God the Creator is not the omni-God asserted by Christianity. Our experience of mortal life, with its suffering, entropy, death, and tragedy, is the best that God the Creator could do and can do. Jesus offers a solution to this tragedy, but the tragedy must be lived for the solution to be accepted. This was no easy step to take. After all, history is full of centuries of Christians suffering through all sorts of unspeakable tragedies, including the early loss of children, which, until quite recently, was practically a given for the vast majority of Christian families. This immediately raises the question of why traditional assumptions about God and the world appeared to work for Christians in the past. Conventional answers to such a question tend to orbit around notions that Christians of the past were more Christian, in the sense that they were more God and church-centered in their consciousnesses because they were uncorrupted by modernity, implying that the only hope for Christians resided in shedding the corruptions of modernity and returning to the mode of consciousness that had kept our ancestors safely in the fold and on God's side. As much as I understand such longings, I don't believe such retroversion is possible. I often attend Mass at my local church, but I would be lying if I told you it did much for me religiously or spiritually. I sense there are many Christians like me out there. For better or for worse, modernity happened and, contrary to traditionalist arguments to the contrary, it is now an integral part of us. Concerning modernity, I don't believe modernity to be a purely external force. Instead, I regard it as part of the enormous shift in human consciousness that occurred some centuries ago. A big part of this shift is the increasing awareness that conventional assumptions about God the Creator do not and cannot line up with the suffering and entropy we experience in mortal life. Unfortunately, in terms of real faith, many recent and contemporary Christians have responded to this irreconciliation by handing back their tickets to God. A truly tragic development, especially when one considers that one can exchange the ticket for a transfer that could allow one to retain their faith, perhaps even deepen it. A Messiah could make no significant difference, leaves the problems of life untouched. Bruce Charlton. There has usually been, and commonly, a yearning for a Messiah, a deliverer or savior of a people or the world. The deep problem is not that the Messiah never actually comes, but that even if there was or is a Messiah, and even if he actually liberated or saved his people or the world, then doing this would leave the fundamental problems of life untouched. This because even if my people or the world was somehow genuinely and lastingly saved from any kind of worldly affliction such as enslavement, poverty, natural destruction, war, poverty, then there would still be entropy, disease, degeneration, death, and there would still be evil. This came to mind in reading Philip K. Dick's exegesis, and considering that for many years he yearned desperately for a savior. In the last weeks of his life, he announced his vision of Tagore, whose role was vicariously to save the planet from man's ecological destruction. But Philip K. Dick was being short-sighted and overwhelmed by current emotion, like when we are sick or afraid, and imagine if only we could be well, we would never be unhappy again. Even if Tagore had been true and had achieved exactly what Dick hoped he would, this would have made zero qualitative difference to the human condition. It is the problem of double negative values the Messiah is supposed to save from, and no matter how many things he was able to save me or us from, then the problems of entropy and evil would still remain. Indeed, no matter what I personally was saved from, I would still have the problem of myself and of my death. Like everybody I have ever heard of, I am quite capable of tormenting myself into misery, even despair, even when I am currently unafflicted by any significant problem, when I am free of pain, of hunger, when I am warm and comfortable and here and now secure. When I imagine or dream terrible things, I am doing this to myself, and the evil is from me. There is the evil in me, there are an uncountable number of bad things that could happen, that cannot be excluded, and there are the universal actualities and possibilities of entropy, especially death, and evil. The most that could realistically be achieved by an actual Messiah would be to impose on his people, because few would accept it, a kind of irreversible blissful ignorance of the fundamental problems, which would need to be some kind of permanent annihilation of consciousness. Which is, if not exactly death, then subjectively indistinguishable from being unalive, and amounts to the wish that we never had lived. This is the terminus of the primacy of any double negative values, a preference for not existence. Why do people still have faith in inverted institutions, such as churches? Bruce Charlton. Why do people still have faith in inverted institutions? Why, that is, do people still assume, and live on the basis that, institutions/organizations/corporations/nations of 2026, retain the same basic motivations and nature as they did 100, or even 50, years ago? Why don't people realize, and operate on the basis that, these institutions are, in almost all cases, long since subverted, corrupted, and substantially inverted in their basic quality? My own experience of this reluctance to recognize fundamental change was that, due both to upbringing and ideals, I had a faith and hope in universities and science, among other types of institution I believed in, but these were perhaps the main ones. It took a long time before I recognized that these had changed their nature, ceased to strive for what they used to strive for, and were not going to reform, because the large majority people in them, and virtually all the leadership, did not want to reform. The large majority preferred the institutions to be corrupt, that is, to be subsidiaries of the single, generic totalitarian left bureaucracy that controls the UK, and all other Western ex-nations. The original functionally motivated people who pursued scientific truth and scholarship had been replaced by bureaucrats and careerists, and the politically motivated. But for quite a while I carried on believing in the institutions, even though I realized that it was only me, and, at most, a handful of others, a tiny minority, who were carrying what I regarded as the spirit of the true institutions, the spirit of science, the spirit of universities. At first I had a quasi-magical belief, and hope, that my own faithfulness to the older nature and motives was keeping alive the, otherwise lost, otherwise actually opposed, spirit of the ancient and original institutions of science and universities. Here, I don't intend quasi-magical to be utterly dismissive, but to recognize that mine was a covert recognition, that in the material realm the institutions was lost, was gone, and that the spirit of the institution was now something that lived only in the mind, and only in the minds of a relatively very few persons. And then I realized that, this being the case, the actual material institutions of science and universities, the professional career and educational structures, building, money, writings, conferences, the bureaucratic systems, all of these had become obsolete, unnecessary, in fact hostile to the ideal. In sum, the act of recognizing a distinction between the spiritual and physical institutions, which was necessary in order to believe in them, implied the irrelevance and counterproductive nature of the actually existing 2026 institutions. To be true to the spirit and to resist short-termism, materialism, subordination to alien and hostile agendas, I needed to rely on my own discernment in choosing goals, selecting evidence and proof, in evaluating quality. I needed to rely on myself, and the sources I had chosen, in determining what and who was true to the spirit, and what or who was indifferent or hostile. Yet, if I, as an individual, could locate and sustain the spirit of science or academia, and if, indeed, it needed me as an individual to do so in the face of at first institutional indifference, then active institutional hostility, then the institution itself, actual universities, the actual structures of science, had become first obsolete, then irrelevant, then an enemy of the ideals they had once, albeit imperfectly, incorporated. Because of corruption and inversion, a wedge needed to be driven between myself and the institution, and that wedge drove the person and the institution ever further apart. What applied to universities and science applies also, and more importantly, to Christian churches. Insofar as we depend upon ourselves to sustain the true spirit of Christianity against the indifference/hostility of an actual church, insofar as we must divide the actual church into a material organizational corrupt part on one side, and a spiritual mystical true part on the other side. Then exactly this activity and necessity implies, indeed entails, that we as individuals, and not any actual church, have become discerners, discoverers, and carriers of Christian truth. Churches have become first feeble, then irrelevant, now mostly hostile to the reality of Christianity. So it is up to us, each of us, as individuals, or many small handfuls of the like-minded. The age of good institutions is dead and gone, and this inversion has been, by the majority, unlamented and indeed even celebrated. It's about time, overdue, that Christians ceased evasive optimism, and recognized the actuality. Things are breaking down. William Wildblood. Mainstream media hasn't noticed it yet, but what is called the post-World War II consensus is drawing to a close. It will be interesting to see how this plays out, though it will surely lead to initial disruption, and maybe even societal disorder which will be blamed by the mainstream on extremists, whereas it is really the reaction of normality to the enforced extremist ideology of the establishment elites. The Western world has been bullied and demoralized by its elites for decades now. Europeans and Americans have been told that any pride they have in their civilizations, any love they have for their people or their countries, is dangerous and should be outgrown. It belongs to the bad old days when there were such harmful concepts as better or worse. Intellectuals and political leaders decided after World War II that such a thing must never happen again. They determined that the way to ensure this was do away with all things that might potentially cause division, which included sovereign nations, religions, and even the idea of the father as the figure of authority. All these had to be weakened and, if possible, dismantled. We should become empathetic and diverse with nothing better than anything else. All equal. That might have sounded good at one time, but when everything is regarded as equal, standards inevitably fall. It is a purely quantitative approach to the problem of different types of human being, and as an experiment it has clearly failed. Now, people are beginning to feel they are losing their countries and could soon even be minorities in their own homelands. Having been lulled into docile slumber for so long, drugged by money and entertainment and sexual liberation, they are starting to wake up. The West has been undone by liberalism along with its subsets, such as feminism and anti-racism and all other egalitarianisms. Liberalism is now being seen as the civilization-destroying ideology it always was. That is not to say there is nothing good about it, but it should be seen more as a medicine for when a society gets sick. It should never be the main diet as it has been for almost 100 years, for then its poisonous aspects will take over. Excessive freedom, of and for the self, becomes a form of slavery. It cannot be a question of going back to the 1980s or 90s, as some younger people who recognize the problem seem to think, a time before mass immigration. Spiritual decay had long set in by then. People like Guénon and Evola were writing about it before the war. Come to that, the Romantics were writing about the disenchantment of the world in the early 19th century, while Edmund Burke and Joseph de Maistre were eloquent opponents of the French Revolution, which was a key event in the formation of the modern mentality. But there can be no question of going back anywhere or to any time. Life has simply moved on and consciousness has changed. Institutions set up in the past to maintain a civilized culture are no longer fit for purpose. They have been captured and deformed to the point where they are beyond saving, but even if they could be saved, they are not suitable for humanity as it is now or as it will be in years to come. We cannot go back. We should learn from tradition, but we cannot return to it as it was. We must reject the whole of modernity as it has worked out in the world, but take care while doing so not to dismiss the core of good at its heart, which is a greater sense of freedom and self-awareness. Growth is the law of life. That is why we cannot go back. Leftism, which is what liberalism has morphed into, is fundamentally about destruction. Ostensibly, it seeks to create something new and better, but really the impulse to destroy is paramount. It seeks to destroy religion because loyalty to a higher power robs it of its power. It seeks to destroy all natural hierarchies because that undermines natural order and a harmonious society, which, being a spiritual disease, is what it wants to do. And it seeks to destroy healthy relations between the sexes because that foments distrust and societal breakdown, which is the objective underlying leftism when viewed from the spiritual angle. Any historian should be able to tell you that civilizational collapse inevitably follows the liberation of women from masculine authority. This may be an unpleasant truth for the modern mind, but not only is it rooted in Christian scripture, it is known by all properly functioning societies because it is written into the fabric of the cosmos that the relationships between the two poles of being should follow a certain pattern, one in which they are spiritually equal but have different functions in terms of created being. To mess with this is to mess with a basic law of creation. And that, of course, is why it is encouraged. We must recognize that the destructiveness, specifically the spiritual destructiveness, of leftism does not come out of nowhere. Human beings, due to their propensity to sin through pride, greed, spiritual rebelliousness, resentment and general egotism, put it into practice on the earth plane, but the impulse behind it, the energy driving it, comes from the dark world that exists between the earthly and the proper spiritual. Fallen spiritual beings are engaged in driving a wedge between God and humanity. They can then exploit human spiritual energy for their own ends. We are protected by God and His angels, but because we have free will and evil is subtle, if we open our hearts and minds to it, the spiritual protection can be overridden. The dark powers can only lead us astray, if we allow them to, which is where temptation comes in. It can prompt us to invite evil into our own hearts, where it forms a canker that will spread unless uprooted by repentance and prayer. Evil cannot affect us unless we do so invite it in, but we have collectively done so. There is also the matter that these dark forces work over long time spans, so if we are not watchful we can gradually stray further and further from God in small degrees. The slippery slope is one of the main weapons in the armory of these powers. It's relatively easy to get us from A to B and then eventually to Z, whereas we would never do that all at once. This is why we must stop the spiritual decline at source, which requires a proper recognition of God and His created order from the very beginning. No compromise. The evils of leftism must be acknowledged. But the danger is that when they are, the reaction will bring its own evils unless it is rooted in spiritual understanding. I would say understanding of Christ, were it not for the fact that even this has been degraded by false religion and ersatz spirituality, in which Jesus has been turned into a drippy humanist whose primary consideration is that people should just get on with each other. Is that why He said He brought a sword rather than peace? He did bring peace, but it was the peace that passes all understanding, a peace not as the world gives peace, but one that comes from overcoming the world. However, along with this spiritual peace there must be the sword that divides and separates as it cuts away untruth from truth. The sword-wielding Christ is the one to whom we should turn for understanding of how to combat the world and how to overcome it. This sword is wielded with love, but it is a sword of flame that burns away falsehood and darkness wherever it strikes. And so when we reject the left, as we must, it should be for the right reason, which is love of the good, love of God and of truth, and without allowing the evils of the left to darken our own hearts as we reject it. If we do let that happen, then we have become absorbed by that against which we fight. This is hard but possible if we keep the vision of the risen Christ before us at all times. The latest tactic of the dark forces in their attempt to sunder man from God is AI. This mechanical, materialistic, absolutely quantitative device is so obviously contra all things spiritual that any right-minded person should be able to see through its spurious allure instantly. But we have been tempted into its arms by all the miracles, pseudo-miracles, of information technology over the last 30 years. We have been corrupted, and many of us are ripe for the picking. This means we start to see AI as a benefactor or, just as bad, as inevitable rather than something that hollows out human thought and creativity, leaving behind just the dry husk of it. AI will stunt our own thinking, blunt our creativity. It will make life duller, flatter, falser, thinner, more empty, and rob it of meaning. Without meaning we are dead, and that is the point. AI is the most advanced phase yet of the attempt to separate man from the spiritual and deny him contact with God and his angels. That means he is as good as dead. One part of the evil forces at work in the world at this time wants to impose an iron control over humanity that separates it from God and the spiritual realm. AI is the latest weapon used in that battle. But there is another part that comes from a deeper level, and this is simply about destruction. We currently see it most obviously in the Middle East, operating through both sides of that conflict. But it is not just about physical destruction. Elsewhere, here in our Western world, it is about spiritual destruction, for when humanity loses all sense of the soul as we are doing as a society, not so much on the individual level but collectively, we are, then it opens itself to exploitation by the dark powers. These powers can no longer access pure spiritual energy, but need it in a downgraded form which they can access through the negative emotion of human beings, anger, fear, hatred, etc. This is why they seek to engender such states and to cut us off from the higher worlds. The chaos of destruction is a feast for these degraded beings. There is no point in sugarcoating the pill. Humanity is in a perilous state at the present time, but God does not leave us defenseless. He and his helpers surround us at all times, and all we have to do is turn to him in humble acknowledgement of our spiritual failure. To turn our life round is not easy, but nor is it that hard once we open our eyes to reality. That truly is all we have to do, and then, though the journey back may be long, at least we will be on the right road. Mankind's rejection of God is a global phenomenon. We are most aware of it in the West because that is where we are, and that is where mankind has fallen further, having risen higher. But it is everywhere. That having been said, many scriptures point to this time, so it was probably an inevitable phase in a long cycle, which means there is nothing to fear. The collapse is inevitable and cannot be avoided outwardly, but it can be robbed of its power to hurt and even used positively by inner spiritual attunement. Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live, and everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die." John 11:25-26. This is the holy truth if we understand belief in Christ to be not simply intellectual assent but complete reorientation of the heart. Sorting the results of 3 decades of publishing hypergraphia. Bruce Charlton. It was in the middle 1980s that I began to publish scientific papers and publish them in professional journals. And this activity naturally spread to the related academic outputs, such as conference abstracts, commentaries, book chapters, book reviews, letters, and discussion pieces. A couple of years later this spilled out from the specialist journals into more mainstream newsstand magazines, New Scientist, Times Higher Education Supplement, the Times newspaper and some others. But when you write as much as I did, and when that writing is for publication, you soon spread into a multitude of that vast, submerged iceberg of little magazines, with readerships measured in hundreds, rather than tens of thousands, of which most people are utterly unaware. Later I published some actual books, of which I wrote or co-authored 7, not counting some online pseudo-books published only in the form of blogs. It fairly soon became apparent that this kind of writing was something I could do, and increasingly enjoyed doing. Writing was a kind of thinking, it seemed to help me understand and discover. And I did this manic publishing for about 30 years, albeit dwindling considerably from 2010, and finishing publishing altogether in 2017. albeit my hypergraphia affliction is not cured, as readers of this blog are all too aware. I had become a case of publishing hypergraphia, as has become apparent to me while sorting through the boxes of papers I salvaged from my university office when I retired. I have copies of many hundreds of items, many of which I cannot remember thinking, writing or publishing. This should not really be surprising, because someone who publishes something, no matter how small or trivial, even at a modest rate of once a fortnight, would produce 26 items per year, 260 in a decade, and 780 in 30 years. And I was publishing somewhat more than once a fortnight. But even that productivity makes a big, heavy heap of papers, especially when, as usual, I had made several copies of each item, so I could distribute them if asked for. And even when not asked. Thus I have been engaged in the melancholy task of throwing out the excess copies, although I still cannot quite persuade myself to apply even minimal quality control about what is saved. I cannot, yet, rid myself of even the most trivial, most obscure, most ephemeral items. I'm still hoarding them sentimentally. But in a few more years, if I am spared, I shall perhaps have rid myself of the delusional conceit that my every micro-emanation is worthy of preservation, and shall, no doubt, have developed the necessary ruthlessness to cull the drivel. At least, that's what I tell myself. Note added. I should emphasize that I made very nearly zero money from 30 years of writing. The best money was from New Scientist, especially when I once wrote a front cover feature, which paid about the same a month of my salary as a newly appointed lecturer, and The Times, which paid £300 apiece in the mid-1990s. But, as a freelance contributor, all these decently paid outlets dried up and completely disappeared from the mid-1990s, due to internal changes in the way that magazines and journals operated. The Magical Scientist, Ceremonial Magic and Science. Bruce Charlton. I am rereading Wizards, A History, by Peter G. Maxwell Stewart, 2004, and reflecting on the use of ceremonial magic throughout recorded history, including in the Bible itself, and other early Christian texts where the magic attributions were sometimes vastly amplified. It all seems to confirm my strong impression that magic and science were pretty much the same thing through most of history, and constituted part of the this worldly and social aspect of religions. So how and why did they separate, or is science still actually a kind of magic? Maybe. The virtue, or otherwise, of magic was mainly a matter of the genuine motivations of the magician, whether, for instance, these were selfish or spiteful, or else altruistic and intended to benefit good causes. And to a lesser extent, the quality of magic was influenced by the good, neutral, or evil nature of spiritual beings that were contacted and summoned, and whose cooperation or aid was sought. But mostly magic was regarded as method, a way of getting things done, such as a means to learn information or accomplish a desired goal. As are science and technology nowadays. Therefore, the main question about any particular usage of ceremonial magic was, does it work? And the answer seems to be, yes. Magic did work. Which is to say that magical ceremonies worked sometimes. Magic sometimes did what it was intended to do. But magic typically worked, it seems to me, partially, by which I mean that although effective, the effects were achieved with great effort on someone's part, sometimes achieved only slowly, sometimes the magic only partially solved the problem. And the outcomes were often controversial, accepted by some, denied by others. And the explanation of any specific magical effect was also controversial, as we see in relation to Jesus in the New Testament. We see differing views of miracles. Was the magic done by Jesus himself, as a divine being, by God via Jesus, by angels or demons Jesus had enlisted? Was there a natural explanation, or was the miracle some kind of illusion, trick or fraud? Much the same could be asked of any magician, since some magicians claimed, or were asserted to be, by followers, divine avatars or emanations, i.e. themselves a god, or to have assimilated to the divine. Therefore, although it can be said that magic worked, there remains the deep question of what it means that magic works, and, in sum, it is evident that any evaluation of any kind of working cannot be made wholly objective and impersonal. That is, different people, different societies, different social contexts, all affect evaluations of whether a procedure is working, and to what extent. But it is possible to regard modern science, say, from the 1600s onwards, as a systematic and communal attempt to make magic work more reliably by diminishing the personal and contextual, such that a given scientific procedure can be counted upon to produce a given result, to a greater extent than was the case with ancient magic. And this goal was pursued, over several generations of scientists, even when the results were more modest, less spectacular, than the results claimed for magic. The point was that scientific results could be relied upon in a way that was less dependent on the qualities of the scientist and the specific situation, than was the case with magicians. Science required much less training and knowledge than magic, and the accepted societal applications of science became much wider than achieved by magicians. Indeed, science became almost universal. Less dependent, but still dependent to a degree, because any reflective and critically minded real scientist would know that the results of science still depend on many of the aspects of ceremonial magic, the knowledge and skills of the scientist, elaborate procedures and equipment, etc. My conclusion is that the magical elements of science were never eliminated, and science could still, therefore, be regarded as a type of magic. However, the successful attempt to reduce the magical aspects in science came at a cost, because the trend led, incrementally, to the eventual elimination of the divine and spiritual from scientific discourse. The point at which the spiritual and divine were altogether eliminated from scientific thinking, in the later 20th century, was the point at which science ceased to be real and became, instead, merely a branch of the totalitarian bureaucracy, and scientists merely a species of research bureaucrat. In sum, real science is a sub-branch of magic built upon those areas of life where the desired effects can most reliably, and more completely, be achieved. Which also means that many aspects of life are ignored by real science because outcomes are unpredictable, or depend too much on individual persons and circumstances. By ceremonial magic, I mean that requiring some combination of knowledge or scholarship, training and practice, and using some kind of, more or less complex, physical procedure, actions, words, and or material artifacts. Somber Jesus or Happy Jesus. Francis Berger. In an earlier post on Christian-themed illustrations, I noted the following. I have mixed feelings about modern/contemporary illustrations and paintings featuring Christ and Christian themes. The vast majority I have encountered over the years tend to have a greeting card quality about them. That is still my overall feeling about modern/contemporary Christian-themed illustrations. However, in that earlier post I held out an exception for some of the work by Yong-Sung Kim, a South Korean painter/illustrator. One painting I particularly like is his Hand of God. Along the same lines, I also think his hand is stretched out still works, mostly because it is simply a variation of his Hand of God painting. Depicting Jesus as happy is a major motif in Kim's work, and I am inclined to empathize with the motivations behind such depictions, especially when pitted against the often all too somber depictions of Christ that dominate Western and Christian art. On the one hand, Kim's paintings show Jesus as a loving Savior who earnestly wants us to follow him to heaven. On the other hand, the happiness factor becomes a bit too much for me at times, not in the intent or motivation, but in the execution, which is too happy joy for my tastes. That greeting card quality I mentioned earlier becomes too glaring to ignore. Case in point, the illustration below. Overall, I sense artists like Kim are generally doing good work, and their motivations seem sincere, so I do not want to be overly critical. Nevertheless, like Kim, I also believe Jesus is happy, joyful, and loving, and I like to think of him in that way. However, there seems to be some disconnect between feeling and envisioning that happiness within ourselves personally, and depicting it visually/externally as art. Although the image, sort of, points in the right direction, it does not, in my humble opinion, succeed in taking the viewer there. Why is 7 the magical/mystical/mythical number? Geoffrey Ashe's answer. Bruce Charlton. I have previously written about the strange way that things fall into sevens, but it is also well known that 7 is usually primary in most, although not all, magical, mystical and mythical contexts, dating back to medieval times, and far more anciently. 7 has some interesting properties arithmetically, and is notoriously difficult for children to handle, when it comes to times tables and mental arithmetic, but these aspects of the number are hardly mystical. And the psychological origins of this primacy of 7 is very difficult to explain, because there aren't any very obvious 7s in nature. Indeed, the 7ness of things is often attributed rather than actual, as with the, supposedly, but not really, 7 stars in the Pleiades, the colors of the rainbow, and the planets. To make 7 planets required leaving out the Earth, and instead including the Sun and Moon, until, eventually, Uranus was discovered. Furthermore, there are exceptions to the primacy of 7, so that any explanation of its role must take these into account. A few weeks ago I discovered a book that tackled this 7 business head-on, analyzed the phenomenon in great detail, and offered a plausible and coherent explanation. It is The Ancient Wisdom by Geoffrey Ashe, 1977. Ashe's answer, as some will have guessed from the illustration, is that the number 7 derives its importance from the stars of the most obvious and recognizable of all constellations of the Northern Hemisphere, known as the Plough, Big Dipper, Great Bear and Arthur's Wain, which has been used for a long time to find the North Star, Polaris. If you go back far enough, Polaris was not always close enough to true north to be a useful guide, and it will not always remain where it now is, axial precession. Geoffrey Ashe's argument is too long, complex, and nuanced to summarize, but it convinced me. If you are interested in the origins of Magic 7, you now know where to look. The lasting influence of alchemical thinking on mainstream modern ideology. Bruce Charlton.
The aim of alchemy was to hasten the processes of nature by precipitating matter through stages of decay and decomposition into a new birth whereby it would become perfect, in the Latin sense of completed or fulfilled, and having once achieved this state, the new-born matter could then be used to heal any sickness in the rest of nature. From Wizards, A History, by P.G. Maxwell Stewart, 2004.
This strikes me as a basic way of thinking that survived long beyond the discipline of alchemy. As I understand this passage, alchemy could be generalized thus. This actual world is of its nature imperfect, only ever partly and intermittently as it should be, continually assailed by unavoidable evil, entropy, death. The aim of the alchemist is to transform this actual world into a perfect state of fulfilled completion. And this alchemical transformation works by controlling and shaping the natural process of dying, death and rebirth. So that the world, individual people, human society, nature itself, is alchemically perfected by accelerating its decay and decomposition, through dissolution, and into a new birth. Imperfect matter is alchemically transformed to perfect matter. The imperfect is therefore deliberately deconstructed, reduced to its fundamentals. In effect, it is destroyed. But this destruction is justified and idealized, for the destroyer, because that which is destroyed is intrinsically flawed, while the destruction is aimed at a remade perfection. Belief in the perfection of the remade justifies the preliminary destruction. If perfection is desired, preliminary destruction must be accepted. The remade, newborn, perfected entity produced by alchemy, which might be a person, new man, society, new world order, or an artifact like the philosopher's stone, will then alchemically work upon, transform, and progressively perfect the untransformed whole. As I read the above passage, it suddenly struck me how often I have come across this alchemical way of thinking, and justifying, among the ruling class, or more generally, and in a reduced and materialistic form, among managers and other bureaucrats. The idea of perfecting via destruction, of transforming by controlled decomposition and remaking. This includes the real truth that things can, typically, only get better, via getting worse, and makes of it a universal justification for making things worse. Including when the real motive is personal benefit, resentment, or spite. Alchemical thinking provides a permanent rationalization for all possible harms inflicted by selfish manipulation or people and the world. And, as I have noticed more recently, this idea of alchemical transformation can take the reality salvation from Jesus Christ, i.e. resurrection into eternal and holy loving life in heaven, on the other side of death, and appropriate it to this worldly human will. Alchemy, thus considered, in its ultimate sense, can therefore be a fundamental alternative to Christianity, and one that has a special appeal to the leadership class of this mortal world. I am certainly not saying that alchemical thinking is always or necessarily evil. I don't believe that is true. Plenty of good people, and Christians, have studied or practiced alchemy, which does contain significant truths, especially when regarded as a way of achieving limited, specific, partial goals. But I am saying that, as a general principle, alchemy is mistaken, it is ultimately not reality, ultimately untrue. And alchemical thinking actually is used to contradict one of the fundamental assumptions upon which Christianity is based. Which is that the evil, entropy and death in this world and mortal life are intrinsic, and cannot be transformed away, and that the only true and real escape from entropy and evil is the salvation of Jesus Christ, on the other side of our personal death. Note added, the way to consider the value of alchemy is as a science. Science has been useful in many ways, but science is not just harmful but actually destroys itself when regarded as metaphysics, i.e. when scientific assumptions are regarded as necessary and universal. Symbolic leaders, able, drooling, or crazy puppets. Bruce Charlton. We know, ought, by now, to realize, that our leaders are puppets, but not all the same kind of puppet. The point is distraction, to have everybody looking at and discussing the puppet, rather than noticing, or even asking, who is people pulling its strings. Distraction can take many forms. Some are constructed as strong puppets, pseudo-competent, attributed with ability. Such a puppet may even be intelligent and hard-working as a person, but is still a puppet. Other leaders are constructed as incompetent, naive, ignorant, or drooling idiots. We observe the incapacities and dysfunctions, empathize or mock the human wreckage, agonize about what is to be done. Others act the role of a crazy, firing off opinions, assertions, threats, promises. People are confused, encouraged to try to make sense of it all, become enmeshed in discerning the puppet's strategic from his reactive nature, and so forth. Many kinds of puppet are possible, and the person deployed as puppet may be more or less convincing his role, may even really be what he is depicted as. This doesn't much matter, because the point is distraction, and the totalitarian media collude in evoking, amplifying, and sustaining this distraction. Since distraction is primary, it can work equally well to have a beloved and admired heroic puppet, or a hated and demonic puppet, or to alternate between them. Thus the job is done. It's a very flexible system. In some places leadership puppets are constantly being replaced, and that business takes up a great deal of here and now attention and energy. In others, the puppet replacement is less frequent, and there is a long narrative attached to the process. In others, the puppet is supposedly permanent, and the debate is about whether rule by a long-term puppet is an unjust and intolerable imposition. Of course, when there is a puppet, then there are puppet masters, those who choose the puppet, and pull the strings. Which means that the real societal power struggle is not between puppets, but between alliances of puppet masters. For the puppet masters, the advantages of puppet rulers are so great that they collude to maintain the public pretense that the puppet is in charge, and that policy U-turns and contradictions are due to changes of the puppet's mind, or corruption of the puppet. E.g., when a drooling idiot is the puppet leader, then nobody asks, nobody with power, anyway, who chose that leader, and who was ruling when the leader was acknowledged incapable of doing so. When we see self-contradiction, and unimplemented policies and the like, what is actually happening is that one master's alliance has grabbed the strings and imposed control and pursue their agenda, only for another alliance to wrest the strings away, then make the puppet say or do something else. All of which public discourse attributes to the nature and motivation of the puppet. In sum, the puppets are, at most, superficial froth on the surface, while the direction of water flow is the product of puppet master activity, and tidal changes of direction are a consequence of different groups of puppet masters in covert conflict, different of their parties achieving temporary dominance. A Survival Guide to the End Times. William Wildblood. My new book will be published in July this year. Here is the back cover blurb. Almost from the beginning, Christians thought they were living in the end times. It didn't happen then, nor did it later, when subsequent generations believed that they too were living at a time of universal decline. Now we are faced with a similar dilemma. The signs of spiritual decay are everywhere, with atheism and materialism rampant, and even non-religious people are seeing a future of growing poverty and cultural loss. The end times have finally arrived. This book discusses how to survive a time when the spiritual is either banished or corrupted by the material. Survival means spiritual survival and involves building an inner defense of understanding for the preservation of what is truly important, your own self. A Survival Guide to the End Times explains the processes that have brought us to our current state, and it details how to negotiate these times successfully from a spiritual perspective. As all aspects of the modern world are affected by the prevailing influence of dissolution, this book examines several areas of life from an end times point of view. The book, like some of my previous ones, expands and develops ideas linked by theme that began life as shorter essays here. There are also several new chapters. The sense that we are indeed living in a period that corresponds to the end times is widespread now, and not just among religious people. An awareness of cultural breakdown is everywhere and will only become more intense. Even those people who outwardly ignore or deny it feel in their hearts that something is amiss in the world, and it is likely that soon denial will no longer be possible. Those who are inwardly prepared for what is to come will be best placed to survive it, survival in this case meaning preserving one's spiritual integrity, for that is all that really matters. Becoming a Christian is not the answer. Bruce Charlton. People seem to think that becoming a Christian is the answer. They think, if they can only become the right kind of Christian, I join the right church and believe and do what it says, then they will have the answers. Not all the answers, but all the most important answers. Because people think that being a Christian is itself the answer, then they make it so, or try to make it so. If they succeed in making being a Christian the answer, then from that point onwards, they hand over responsibility for ultimate values to whatever they consider to be Christianity. From that point onwards, their job is to understand and obey. They regard becoming a Christian as arriving, coming home, as the end. If, however, they fail to make it so, and discover that becoming a Christian is not the answer, then they stop being a Christian. However, I would say that becoming a Christian is not the answer. Instead, becoming a Christian is to ask the right question. I would say that becoming a Christian is not the end, but instead the beginning. I am the way, the truth and the light. Explained. Bruce Charlton.
And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again, and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. And whither I go ye know, and the way ye know. Thomas saith unto him, Lord, we know not whither thou goest, and how can we know the way? Jesus saith unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no man cometh unto the Father, but by me. John 14, 3-6.
My understanding of this report of Jesus' teaching is that he is implicitly contrasting the new dispensation with the old. In the old dispensation, the way was a highly literal way. It was single path, the law, a single life pattern of beliefs and behavior that every man needed to follow if he was to be favored by God in this mortal life. But the old way made no difference to what happened to him after death. The ghostly realm of Sheol was the common destination for all men. When Jesus says that he himself is the way, this is at first a paradox, because a person cannot be a path. So Jesus means he himself is replacing the old idea of a single and specified path through mortal life. In future, in Jesus' new dispensation, to do the right thing, to live well, we ought to think of our relationship with the person of Jesus, because Jesus is now the way. We should therefore have a relationship with Jesus instead of trying to stick to walking along a semi-literal, and single, legally pre-specified, track through the choices and chances of this world. By my understanding, the truth seems to refer to reality, or how things are with respect to what is important. In other words, our relationship with Jesus is the most important thing, from now. All this is assuming that we ourselves want what Jesus is offering in his new dispensation, which is described as the life. The life is, in other words, being used here as shorthand for resurrected eternal life in heaven, heaven instead of Sheol. And also instead of any other alternative postmortal situation or state, such as annihilation, depersonalized bliss, or some kind of reincarnation. The phrase cometh the Father is less clear, and may, I think, be a later interpolation. But the Father could be taken to refer to the nature of divine creation, such that coming to the Father would mean coming to live in perfect harmony with divine creation, which is heaven, that is to say, living by love always and wholly. Therefore, being with the Father might be living in the heavenly state, which is by love and without evil, and life without coexistent death, meaning something like entropy, i.e. disease, damage, aging, etc. A loving relationship with Jesus, and intention to accept what Jesus offers, is now replacing the old conceptualization of the way. It follows that following Jesus is the only way to heaven. There is no other route through life to resurrection. No man cometh to the Father except by the nature of his relationship with Jesus. Note, as background, I also understand that our relationship with Jesus is by the Holy Ghost, which is the Spirit of the ascended Jesus as we may know it in this world and mortal life. And I also assume that although we can and should commit to love and follow Jesus in this mortal life, the actual following Jesus to resurrected eternal life in heaven must happen, and can only happen, after death, i.e. post-mortally. Memory, dreams, and heaven. Bruce Charlton. My understanding of dreams is that their specific content, their details, are much less important than their general theme and emotional tone that they leave behind. This is why many people, including me, don't remember their dreams, or else have only hazy and partial memories. Indeed, the unreliability of memory, its fading, distortions, and apparent loss, its second-rate quality compared with lived experience, is something that seems to threaten even the possibility of a meaningful life, at least, if memory is regarded as necessarily a physical, material thing. A dream last night seemed to be about memory itself, and that way that, somehow, in some part of ourselves, the joyful essence of the very best of our past life experiences, even of decades before, is alive. Such a dream was every bit as real and powerful an experience as anything material in the waking world. Indeed, it seemed to surpass real life. Such a dream reveals that the best memories are not lost, nor even faded or distorted, but significant memories are powerfully and actively present in our minds and spirits, here and now. This fits with and makes sense of my understanding of heaven, because some dreams, not often, at least not often for me, can be a foretaste of what heaven is like and how it works. I interpret the way a dream can be experienced as the best of ourselves, the best of others, and the best of this world, and that during the dream we can really respond fully to such things, as a practical demonstration of what resurrection will do fully and eternally. Love one another in mortal life, because there is nothing else. Francis Berger. The Irish Papist recently featured a post called "Reading is about much more than the classics," which inspired me to reflect on various classics and ponder my reading habits these days. I will forego my thoughts on the former here and focus instead on the latter, specifically, my experiences reading Hungarian literature in the original language, even more specifically, the short novel I am currently reading, Koponyachigye, The Place of the Skull, by Sylvester Ordo. Nearly all the Hungarian books I read come courtesy of the Take a Book, Leave a Book library at the Sopron train station, where I stop to peruse the titles on my way to or from work. The shelves overflow with classics, both Hungarian and international. However, I rarely touch them. The Hungarian classics I have sampled have been as dry and flavorless as Melba toast. As for international classics, I prefer them in English rather than Hungarian translation, although I do sometimes make exceptions. What I tend to look for are Hungarian or international books with unfamiliar authors and titles, and this is how I came across Sylvester Ordo's Place of the Skull, a thin volume that presents a fictionalized alternative record of Jesus' final days before his crucifixion. Ordo depicts Jesus as a mortal man, one fully aware that he is neither the Messiah nor the Son of God, yet determined to leave mankind with a religion and a way of life that was truer than the laws of the Pharisees and Sadducees. The crux of that religion. To love one another with all our strength in the knowledge that this expansion and deepening of love ameliorates all the inescapable suffering, entropy, and death inherent in mortal life. I am only halfway through the book, but as of now, it is clear that resurrection and heaven are off the table. If there is any afterlife, it exists only in Sheol, the Hebrew underworld where souls go to rest in a state of sleepy, semi-consciousness. In the part I am reading now, Jesus realizes that he has taken his revolutionary teachings as far as they will go. Any further effort on his part would only damage or diminish the seeds of love he has planted in minds and hearts, to say nothing of his own devotion to live by love, a commitment he describes as wavering when he angrily drove the money changers from the temple's entrance. The realization prompts him to convince Judas, whom Ordo presents as the most intelligent apostle, the only one who really got what Jesus taught, to betray him. Jesus' reasoning. Dying is the only way he can protect his new, truer religion. Jesus fears that the cracks and limitations of his life by love religion would become apparent and unconvincing were he to continue living. Judas reluctantly agrees to Jesus' request, but only after Jesus manages to convince him that death is the only way the truth of life by love can be preserved and expanded. I will have more to say once I finish the novel. For now, I'm inclined to believe that Ordo was a sincere materialist and atheist who recognized the flaws and limits of Marxism and sought to augment its materialistic aims to reduce the suffering and injustices of mortal life with something he regarded as deeper and more human, all while accepting that mortal life ultimately had no real solution. The best one could hope for is to make the experience more satisfying or tolerable. I state the above because the novel appeared in Hungary in 1976, by which time the failures of Marxist socialism were too glaring to ignore. Even the most committed Communist Party members discreetly acknowledged that Marxism had failed. Contrary to its aims, communism tended to exacerbate human suffering rather than alleviate it. Ordo was a party member himself, as was anyone who wished to make a name for themselves in socialist Hungary. He is often referred to as a party member who was not a communist, a tagline that must be taken with a grain of salt simply because it has been applied to practically every writer, artist, scientist, thinker, athlete, or politician who made a name for themselves during Hungary's communist years. Nevertheless, as the basic thematic thrust of The Place of the Skull indicates, Ordo's case of not being a communist seems authentic. He was a writer on the lookout for a better solution to the problem of mortal life, one Marxism could not provide. Unfortunately, the life by love, this worldly religion Ordo's Jesus promulgates, is hardly better in this regard. More on that in the next post. Transformation and translation. Born again into the second creation. Bruce Charlton. Joining up a couple of dots from what I've said, when Jesus met Nicodemus and told him that men need to be born again, Jesus meant that we must die first, in order to attain resurrected eternal life. And, if we follow Jesus, this second birth will be into the second creation, the creation by Jesus, which is heaven. We must be born again, by resurrection into heaven, which involves both personal transformation, resurrection, and personal translation, moving from mortal earth to heaven.
There was a man of the Pharisees, named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. The same came to Jesus by night, and said unto him, Rabbi, we know that thou art a teacher come from God, for no man can do these miracles that thou doest, except God be with him. Jesus answered and said unto him, Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Nicodemus saith unto him, How can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter the second time into his mother's womb, and be born? Jesus answered, Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. Marvel not that I said unto thee, You must be born again. John 3, 1-7.
Fake fights, fake wars, and when the reason for real enmity is calculatedly misdescribed. Bruce Charlton. That we spontaneously take sides is evident whenever we watch any kind of contest, such as a sport. We find ourselves rooting for one or another person or team, even when we know nothing about that sport and have no reason to care who wins, one way or the other. We are all and often manipulated by our instinctive propensity to take sides, including in evolutionarily novel situations, where we have no need or reason to take sides, and where we have zero reliable information concerning what is really going on. Thus, we frequently, almost automatically, find ourselves supporting some entity engaged in deliberate and strategic evil, wanting them to win, and excusing or denying the harms they are doing. In the public domain, in international or within nation conflicts of all kinds, including wars, of all kinds, we seldom know, are seldom told, what that fight is really about, what really motivates the two sides who have created, sustained and escalated the fight. My best guess is that almost all real wars at present are about something quite other than the explicit, publicly proclaimed, reasons for war. And indeed there may not be a real fight. Plenty of the conflicts reported and analyzed in the mass media, and among politicians are utterly fake. I mean, both parties are on the same side, and merely putting on a drama of fighting each other. We are manipulated into taking sides, but they are all on the same side, and against us. Our best hope in resisting psychological, and spiritual, manipulation by the powers of evil, is to become conscious of our own innate tendency to take a side, and deliberately to disengage mentally from the given choice. To take neither side, but because we must do something, we need to push out the wrong with something right. Instead we ought to support some other side. Support a third side. And make sure that side is in harmony with the purposes of divine creation. Note added, that should be our default assumption, whenever presented by the media, and officialdom with some conflict. In other words, we should assume that they are being untruthful, either about the reality of conflict, the causes, the real sides, or something. We may occasionally be wrong, a stopped clock sometimes tells the right time, and they will sometimes tell us something factually correct, but even then the interpretation of the facts will surely be false. Detection of what is happening, disbelief, and disengagement, should be our default response, if we can manage it. We can seldom know what really is happening, but we can be sure it is never what they are telling us is happening.